Hi everyone. Well, thanks for joining us today for our session on paid promotion. And I'm Aidan. For those who don't know me, I'm a partner at Cass from Clay, and I've been working as a digital strategist basically for the past 15 years, right from the early days of social media. And over that time, I've basically seen two phases. So initially, you could achieve reach just by posting content organically. And in case any of you don't know what organically means, that means just posting without any paid promotion behind it. And in the last maybe 6 or 7 years, we've seen the main platforms make changes to their algorithms, basically as they sought to monetize their platforms through ad revenue. And what this has meant is that organic content has basically struggled to have the same cut through as it did maybe 10 years ago. And yet, very few policy organizations use paid social as a tactic. And out of the few who do, many don't use it particularly well. So the aim of this webinar is to give you a bit of an overview of the process for setting up a campaign, what questions you need to ask yourself, and what the common mistakes are. So on that note, let's kick off. And first, let's be clear about what we actually mean by social media advertising. So paid social is the promotion of digital content through advertising on social media. So you may be familiar with some of the advertising formats online. So they include banner ads, they include recommended links, paid search you've probably come across, and also native social media ads. And so we're going to be focusing on the latter of those two, and in particular Twitter and LinkedIn, since those are probably the most useful formats for policy organizations, at least when you're starting out. But worth noting that the logic that we're going to be talking about of setting up paid campaigns is essentially the same for Facebook, Instagram, and most other digital platforms. So before we jump into how to set up, let me make the case for paid. And first of all, why would you do it? Well, it helps you reach new audiences. So if you think of your online following as this gray circle, this is basically your maximum organic reach. Where the reality is, you're probably not going to hit all of all of your followers. You're going to hit a proportion of those. What paid does is it gives you a chance to go far beyond that, and not only that, it can also help you target very specific audiences within that broader audience. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Secondly, well, it's very effective. And by way of example, this is the reach that we achieved for a Twitter ads campaign that we ran last year. So each column is an individual tweet from the campaign, and in pink, you can see the organic reach. And in yellow, you can see the reach that we achieved through paid for the 2 posts that we promoted. And, I think the impact is clear enough to see here. And then thirdly, it's good value for money, quite simply. And so a recent study by a company called Asset Digital showed the comparative cost rather to reach an audience of about 2,000 people. And what you can see here is that social media ads are actually very cost effective, especially compared to traditional forms of advertising. So now we've made the case for it. How do we set it up? Well, each platform basically provides you with an interface where you can set up your own campaigns, and some platforms are easier to use than others. So we recommend that you plan a number of things in advance before you even think about opening your browser. And so we've identified 6 steps that will help you do this upfront thinking. But before we talk about those 6 steps, first a bit of a health check. Make sure that you set up your ad account early enough in advance before you even start your campaign. And as part of that, before you do that, make sure that you'll need to set up a payment method. So this is typically a credit card. So make sure that you've got the details, the card details available to you. And then you'll also be asked to set a currency, and set a location. And so this is something that's actually worth thinking about upfront for those organizations who operate in multiple locations and have multiple country offices. Worth noting that once you've set the currency, you can't change it. So, if you've got a head office, it's worth maybe thinking about doing it there, or setting the currency to whatever country your comms team are going to be operating this is. So, having set up your account, then the next thing to do is define your objective. So obviously this is not specific to social media advertising, it's just good comms. Simply. So think about who you want to target and how you'll want to influence them, what you want them to do as a result. And being clear about this will help you with the next step, which is to pick your platform. So to do this, ask yourself basically which platforms do those audiences you're trying to reach use. So experience will help you on that front, but really you should be evaluating this on an ongoing basis. Also, what are each platform's targeting capabilities? So each platform allows you to target ads at their users based on a number of criteria which are specific to the platform. So familiarize yourself with each platform's targeting capabilities. It'll help you pick the right channel. And we'll talk a little bit about this shortly. And then also, what's your ad spend budget? So this is worth thinking about because some platforms are more expensive to advertise on than others. So LinkedIn, for example, they're typically more expensive than, say, Twitter or Facebook. So that is worth thinking of as a factor. Third step, set your campaign goals. So when you're setting up your campaign, like the platforms will ask you what the goal of your campaign is. And that's basically for two reasons. First of all, to help them optimize the campaign accordingly, like if they know what matters to you, but also because your campaign goal will also be in large part the basis on which they charge you. So there are a few differences between platforms, but they all offer broadly similar goals, and we've provided a couple of examples here from Twitter and LinkedIn. So in deciding what your campaign goal is, ask yourself which of the platform's campaign goals offers the best KPI against what your comms objective is, what metric also will speak most to your internal stakeholders, and like maybe more in the medium term, ask yourself the question whether you need to educate your internal stakeholders about what these metrics actually mean. Then fourth step, setting targeting criteria. So I mentioned earlier, each platform has its own set of targeting criteria. And we've provided here some of the key, most relevant ones here for Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, just as an example, but worth noting there are many more for each of these platforms. And so you'll need to define which criteria essentially will provide the best opportunity for you to target your audience with the least amount of wastage. And for that, you'll need to find that sweet spot, basically. So, if your targeting is too broad, your audience will be vast and your budget is unlikely to reach the people who matter to you. Conversely, if your targeting is too narrow, then your audiences will probably be too small and chances are you won't get any hits. So worth finding what that sweet spot is in targeting. Fifth, defining the creative. So there are a number of different formats to choose from depending on which platforms you use. So check which ones are available to you based on the platform you're going to use, and then decide what the best creative is. And worth asking yourself the question, how complex is the message? Do you have time to create a new asset? Or do you have existing assets that you can use? So typically policy organizations have more complex messages or more nuanced messages than consumer organizations. So we tend to recommend recommend using short social media campaign videos for this, which helps you kind of set out a narrative. But that's not the only way, basically. Pick the one that suits your campaign best. And then finally, set the budget and the duration of your campaign. So the budget question is by far the most common question that we get asked, and we'll get onto that in a second. But a few things worth being aware of. So platforms generally give you quite a lot of control over your spending, as you can see, and there are 3 examples of some of the settings that you can implement. The formula for calculating a budget quickly becomes very complicated because of the number of moving parts. Some of which, like external competition, for example, so how many people are you going to be advertising against, you can have no prior knowledge of. So my recommendation on this tends to be leave the math for later, and when you've developed your knowledge base and found out what works for you. For now, if this is early on, and you're just starting out, your priority is to get used to how social media ads work and what those variables are. So basically just dive in and experiment. Which brings us neatly to our next section, which is 3 questions that we get asked all the time. And in particular, as I mentioned, this is the most common answer. And the simple answer to that question is it's scalable, but the real question is how much impact you want to have, and ultimately how much budget do you have. Although this is probably the most truthful answer we could give you, on this, but we have found, to be candid, that this line of argument ends up in kind of circular conversations, and nothing ever gets done because there are too many moving parts. So just to unlock that situation, here's our recommendation to get you started. So with your first campaign, suggest you position it as a pilot or a test campaign, to run it across 1 or 2 markets, set a maximum budget, maybe start with $100 to $200 per market, for Twitter, or as I mentioned, LinkedIn's a bit more expensive, so maybe think about $500 to $1,000 per market on LinkedIn. Select automated bids, so you can normally set bids manually, so how much you want to pay for a particular result, whether it's video views, whether it's clicks, etc. If this is your first one, I suggest selecting automated bids, and the platform will adjust that for you, and build from there. The more experience you get, the more you can start using setting bids manually. But for now, yeah, start off with that. Secondly, what's the best targeting approach? We often get asked this, and there's no stock answer to this. It basically depends on the audience of the platform. But again, here's our recommendation to get you started. First of all, never use automated targeting. So if you've joined this webinar, you probably work for a think tank or a policy organization of some sort. You're not a consumer organization. The automated targeting function from each platform tends to cater for consumer organizations. So don't use automated targeting, do that manually. That's very important. And then again, I suggest you incorporate that as part of your position it as a pilot campaign. A/B test different types of targeting methods to find out what works. So start with, for example, on Twitter, comparing how targeting according to keywords performs compared to your follower lookalikes, or targeting by events or conversation topics. You can, if you just Google what the definitions of all of those are, you'll be able to find them. Unfortunately, I don't have time to define each of those right now, but similarly for LinkedIn, maybe start with, say, industry and job role and their seniority, and maybe compare that to targeting according to interests. And basically, as ever, as you do this, monitor, evaluate, and refine. The third question that we often get asked is, why are my ads not running? And this could be for a number of reasons. So there's a couple of scenarios here. Including if you've launched a campaign but your ad isn't running, it could mean, for example, that you've either not added a payment method, or that the payment method that you added is invalid, so that does happen. It could also be that for some reason the start date is in the future. That's happened when you've kind of pre-scheduled a campaign and forgotten to adjust the start date. It could be that the ad is still going through the platform's approval processes. So when you launch it, it doesn't kind of like run straight away. The platform has to do its internal checks to make sure that it's appropriate content and the like. So if that's the case, there should be a status message saying something like pending. If it says rejected, it's most likely because because you've contravened some of the restrictions on advertising political content, but also potentially because there's too much copy on the creative, for example. So yeah, have a think about that. If the ad was running but stopped, there could be a number of other reasons. For example, the campaign ran out a budget, or the bid levels were too low if you've set those manually. There could be a limit on the credit card. We've seen that before, where basically there was, I don't know, $500 limit, for example, and you hit that, and then the campaign stopped because the platform wasn't processing payments anymore and the like. So those are the most common reasons really that we've come across. We also wanted to leave you with 3 mistakes that we see all the time. First of all, and this is by far the most common, but that's not giving yourself enough time. The irony is that it's often the least experienced people, so in other words, those least capable of executing a paid campaign at speed, who don't give themselves time. And this means that you're constantly being reactive, you're not able to take a strategic approach to paid. So worth being aware, experts plan ahead and give themselves time by thinking about paid systematically. So common mistakes include not allowing yourself time to set up the ad account in the first place. So I mentioned that earlier, but also often connected to this, underestimating how long and tricky it can be to troubleshoot the setup of the payment methods. Every single campaign I've ever run, clients have tended to underestimate that and to think it would be a breeze. So worth allowing yourselves a few days for that, just in case. If you've already set up the ad account, make sure that you buy yourself time. So factor platform approval times into your process. And basically try as much as you can to abide by each platform's political content policies. Falling foul of these policies could actually set you back a few days because you'll have to upload new content or new creative, which is not ideal when your campaign has to go live. But overall, our most important message on this is to educate yourself and start thinking about it strategically and systematically, rather than reacting to internal stakeholders' requests who don't always understand how social media ads work. Which leads us to the second most common error that we see, which is not managing internal stakeholders' expectations. And I always say ad campaigns are effective, but they're not magic. And I've seen, for example, an organization who were running an event in 2 days' time, trying to fill a room through paid search. That's just not going to happen. That's not the right way to do it. So the point is, learn what ad campaigns in general are good at. And also how individual platforms compare to each other. How are they good compared to each other? And also learn what the parameters of each platform are and educate your internal stakeholders. So they won't know necessarily what the targeting criteria that you have to work with are, or what a realistic timeline looks like, for example, or what results are realistic. So get on the front foot, map out an internal process and engage them in advance, manage their expectations, and they'll respect you as a trusted advisor. And then the last mistake that we wanted to highlight is not managing your ad campaign once it's launched. And we see this quite often where you launch it and then move on to other things. Our advice on this is keep an eye on your campaign's performance. Make sure you stagger the budget over the campaign duration, Once you've become accustomed to how much your cost per result is, start setting bids manually. This will give you more control over your campaign and make your budget go further. While the campaign is running, check which targeting method or creative is giving you the best results. If you set up a few different ones for A/B testing, and then refine your targeting criteria or reallocate budget to your best performing creative. And finally, watch out for ad fatigue. So if you have a niche audience in particular, it's possible that by the end of it, you'll have served all of your audience with the same ad 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And if they haven't clicked on it the second or third time, they probably won't at the 6th or the 7th time of asking. So at this point, you might see your campaign performance trail off, and it might be worth refreshing your creative. So just a summary slide on that note, and that's all the time that we have for now, at least.